Hey dudes, this is Miss Misery of Movie Massacre, and you're listening to Tommy Throwback Kovac on Splat from the Past. Tommy will come anywhere.
Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror and sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today is a very special episode of Splat from the Past. Last year I had a ton of horror hosts on for the month of Halloween, October, and for some reason this year I haven't had much luck getting them other than Miss Misery. But today I have, for the first time ever, Mr. Lobo. Yes, the world-famous Mr. Lobo, the host of Cinema Insomnia. I'm having him on the show today because he's going to promote... he's got a DVD line that he wants to promote along with a streaming channel for Roku. And I think he's got other things like convention appearances and maybe a Halloween episode of Cinema Insomnia coming up as well. And I'm having him on today to talk about all that stuff. I can't wait. Mr. Lobo is probably the most famous horror host out there right now, next to the legendary Elvira. No one has his level of success as he does, and it's a real honor today. So yeah, here is my interview with Mr. Lobo.
Hello.
Mr. Lobo?
Hey, greetings. Sorry about that. I had a family situation I had to deal with, but I'm okay now. Everything's fine.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's okay. It happens a lot on the show and stuff. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. Very good. Good to hear. Good to talk to you again. Very excited to be on the show. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. It's such an honor to have you. So, going back in time, do you remember the first horror sci-fi film you ever saw?
The first horror film that I can remember that impressed upon me, I think it was called "And Now the Screaming Starts." I keep thinking it's a different movie, but then it's one of those things you see as a kid and it scares you so bad that you're looking at it through your fingers, you know.
Yeah.
But it's definitely on Creature Features, and I probably was like 3 or 4 years old. And and I may have had some glimpses of some things like Creature from the Black Lagoon or whatever, but I don't know if I was aware of it. But there was this hand crawling by itself, and I always thought it was the crawling hand for years. I kept saying, "Oh yeah, the crawling hand," but no, I think it's from "And Now the Screaming Starts" or from House of Drip Blood, but it was one of those Hammer Amicus movies, and it had a disembodied hand crawling, and that affected me really bad. And as far as sci-fi goes, I think Forbidden Planet probably. Seeing Robbie the Robot, I think, was just like mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So those are probably that one's an easy one to pin down. But there was another one that I saw real young too. It was actually Lady Frankenstein, where the Frankenstein monster grabs a bird out of a tree and eats it, and it was so upsetting. Like I could never be right again after seeing that.
Yeah. I grew up in the Bay Area. I mean, I grew up watching, classics that were on like, PBS or KQED late at night, like Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe and the original Little Shop of Horrors and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, those are great. Well, they used to have that Super Science Fiction Sunday or whatever on KTEH.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of great ones on there I remember watching.
Yeah. Do you have like a list of your favorites?
Of sci-fi films?
Of horror sci-fi films that you grew up watching,
it's never ending, right? I mean, I love The Blob. I love Plan 9 from Outer Space. I mean, the original Little Shop of Horrors is amazing. The Brain That Wouldn't Die, I watch it every time it comes on. I don't know what it is about that movie. Utterly hypnotizes me. I love, there's just so many. I mean, course, I loved Star Wars as a kid, and I did watch all those Flash Gordon serials, and I really was crazy about The Invisible Man. I thought that was probably my favorite Universal for whatever reason. I loved bandaging up my head and pretending to be the Invisible Man, but I also liked the Wolf Man and Son of Frankenstein, and there's just so many. I've always been a huge fan of sci-fi and horror. I mean, like I said, when I was real little, they scared me real bad. But I think it's just because I had an overactive imagination, so everything I saw it times 10.
Yeah. I loved, Carnival of Souls and Night of the Living Dead and Little Shop of Horrors and stuff like that. And
did you watch? I think the first time I saw Night of the Living Dead was on Creature Features. I think it might have been Bob Wilkins showing me Night of the Living Dead.
I was just born during the year that John Stanley was wrapping up Creature Features.
Oh, okay, different age for different age group.
Yeah, the horror hosts I grew up on were Joe Bob Briggs and Rhonda Shear and Gilbert Gottfried on USA Up All Night, and Commander USA as well.
Yeah, incredible, right? I mean, interesting where cable came in and served the same function that the UHF stations were serving in the 70s, and early TV VHF stations were serving in the 50s. It was a new technology that, and they were trying to get a lot of cheap programming that can build an audience, and it doesn't come any cheaper than a hosted movie. And people will watch every week if they like the host. And Commander USA was amazing. And Lefty, his sidekick, which was drawn on his right hand.
Yeah.
And then Rhonda Shear, who was an actress, who I always felt she was doing the shtick from Laverne and Shirley. There was a character called Rhonda on Laverne and Shirley who would talk about herself in the third person, and it seemed like she was doing a similar shtick. But she was gorgeous, and then Gilbert Gottfried was funny, and in my brain I always remembered them like there was the Rhonda Shear era and then the Gilbert Gottfried era, or vice versa, but actually they were both on concurrently. So I think Friday nights was Gilbert Gottfried and Saturday nights was Rhonda Shear, or vice versa. And so they were both at the same. They were both hosting in that same time period, not one or the other.
Yeah, the ones you primarily grew up with though were Bob Wilkins and John Stanley, right?
Yeah, more Bob than John. When I was a kid, I lived in Sacramento, and I could get the San Francisco stations over the rabbit ears, which was for whatever reason, harder to do in the early 80s. Maybe that bandwidth was getting redistributed already, I don't know. But certainly, and maybe the advent of cable also kind of changed a lot of that. But if the wind was blowing the right way, we could get the San Francisco stations and the Sacramento stations. And Bob was on both. Bob was in both markets, doing two different shows simultaneously. So we got a lot of Bob Wilkins in that time period.
Yeah, didn't he? He had that show where he was in the space outfit, and his wife said that she would divorce him if he didn't stop doing that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was Captain Cosmic. Days a week, and he was showing Ultraman and Speed Racer and Star Blazers, and they would take Godzilla movies and serialize them, so you'd see 20 minutes a day of a Godzilla movie.
Yeah.
They take the old Flash Gordon serials to show those. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. He was great as Captain Cosmic and Wonder Robot PT2, so he was hosting the cartoons and the kids shows, and then on Friday and Saturdays he was hosting Creature Features, and then on Saturday nights on KTXL in Sacramento, Channel 40, he had the Bob Wilkins Horror Show, which he just, which was, I believe, a double feature also. So there was a lot of Bob Wilkins product as a kid, and I just assumed he was everywhere. I didn't realize he was specific to Northern California. And older, there were a few other hosts. Like I did watch Elvira as a teenager, and boy, she was a great one to find as a teenager. And I also watched Lorraine Newman from Saturday Night Live had a show where she was a cute usherette.
Huh.
Her and her mom owned a movie theater that did so badly. The movies that they showed were so bad at the movie theater that they couldn't get people to come into the theater.
Mm-hmm.
They turned the snack bar into a laundrette. And so while people were doing their laundry, they'd have to go sit and watch the movie while they're waiting for their socks to get dry. And so that was the premise of the movie, is that it was a movie theater that was turned into a laundrette to force people to come there because they had to wash their clothes. But that was called the Canned Film Festival. It was sponsored by Dr. Pepper. And she was, like I said, I had kind of a little boyish crush on Lorraine Newman, so I enjoyed that show too. And I did watch, I was a little older, but of course I did watch Joe Bob and Monster Vision and all that stuff. And like, my experience with Joe Bob was I worked kind of say maybe in the late 80s, early 90s. I worked at a cafe, and the weekly paper had his Joe Bob at the Drive-In article. He was like reviewing the movies, like, this one has, there's 3.5 boobs in this movie and 20 gallons of blood, or, he would have this whole breakdown of all these movies. I'd never, ever seen anyone review a movie like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they were hilarious articles. And so when I found out they were giving him a TV series, I was really excited to see what he looked like. And I remember just being really disappointed at how handsome he was, and how normal he seemed. Because if you read that, by reading those articles, I was imagining like a guy with a beer belly hanging over his belt, and maybe thinning hair and a dirty cowboy hat, or you know what I mean. I was just imagining a guy a lot rougher looking, and somebody who would be at home living in a trailer. I was not expecting a guy with so much, so charming and with so much TVQ, and so I remember being taken aback a little bit by how normal he seemed. But I did love his mind, his humor, and his writing, and his perspective on those movies was so good, so rich.
Yeah, I'm actually good friends with a couple of people who formed the Groundlings with Lorraine, so I will pass that along.
Oh, wonderful! That's great. Yeah, I'm a huge Lorraine Newman fan. So
I think she's hilarious and very underrated.
Yes, and underrated by some, but people like us who really appreciate how damn funny and charming she is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's a whole other thing.
So how did Cinema Insomnia start for you?
Cinema Insomnia started very slowly. I think everyone has this idea of wanting, everybody wants to be a horror host, I feel like everybody is part horror. I think it's a spectrum. I think everyone has at least a little bit of horror host in them.
Oh yeah, I do.
and so I think that everybody wants to be a horror host, just like everybody wants to be a rock star. Everybody thinks maybe they might want to be a puppeteer. It's a fun thing to want to do. And I remember imitating Rod Serling in The Mirror, even as a kid. But really, the opportunities, it's not something you can just go, okay, I'm going to be a horror host, going to start hitting the pavement and, start looking in the newspaper and see if anyone's hiring a horror host. It was one of those things. It was a dream. It was something that on the weekends maybe I'd film something in the garage by myself, or later I had a friend at a TV station that let me come in there on a Saturday and play around. And nothing ever was really that great. Like I felt like I wasn't really comfortable enough in front of the camera, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I had a lot of ideas, had a lot of material, in the 90s, I wrote for a magazine called Planet X, which was, I guess, could be classified as a fanzine, but it was a sci-fi pop culture magazine. And they had interviewed Bob Wilkins, and then they did a live show to launch our magazine. And Bob Wilkins offered to host this event and drove up from Reno, and I got to meet him. And I was assigned the task of producing on the show and writing some material for Bob for this live show. And we did a couple live shows with Bob, as it turns out. And Bob was very encouraging. He was like, you're funny. You've got a lot of ideas. This is something you should really try and do. You should get out in a chair and host movies. And I said, Bob, people don't really do that anymore. This is something from when we were kids, and this is about our nostalgia for you and what you did. It's like, things have a cycle to them, usually a 20-year cycle. You could be on the forefront of another wave, of horror hosts. I remember just feeling that nothing could be less likely, even though I would really want to do that. I just remember kind of trying to shrug it off, but Bob did encourage me a lot. He'd send me little cassette tapes and postcards. And 8 years later, I had a job at a television station. Finally had a job at a television station. And there was a movie at 3 in the morning that ran 20 minutes short. And so they had these 6-minute commercial breaks in the middle of the night. And I went into the general manager's office, and I had a friend at the station too, who would direct them, Mike Strange. Two of us went into the general manager's office, and I remember saying, I think I could fill this extra time. Have you ever tried to sit through a 6.5-minute commercial break? It's brutal. And they didn't even have commercials. It was all PSAs and promos. So it wasn't like they would be losing any advertising dollars. They weren't selling that time. And the movie in the middle of the night was getting zero. It was getting hash marks in the Nielsen rating, zero. An undiscernible amount of people were watching at 3 in the morning. So there was nothing to lose, and they didn't care, which was the best blank check. We had a whole TV studio and $4 million worth of equipment. We pretty much could do whatever we wanted to, but something in the back of my mind thought I should really try to keep this minimalist, really try to keep it simple, because if they decide they don't want to do it anymore and I want to keep doing it, I want to be able to keep doing it. And so I started thinking about the Twilight Zone and Night Gallery, as well as earlier versions of Bob's show, and they were really simple. It's like it was just like a black void, or black psych, as they would call it in the business, where you couldn't tell how far back that blackness goes. And just be in a chair in this sort of negative space. And that was one thought I had, is that it would seem like an older show, like it would be like a kind of minimalist and mod, and out of time and space and culture, and in the realm of the imagination, so we could just kind of go anywhere. We weren't really chained to horror movies. Like if I was in a dungeon, it would have to be horror movies, or it would seem like we were off-brand. If I was on a space station, there'd be a certain kind of content that would be expected. I like this idea of being able to have this open canvas so that I could bring anything into that world. If I want to be on a boat, I could bring in a couple oars, and I could just row in my rocking chair and be on a boat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a kid playing in a cardboard box. It could be anything.
Yeah.
So we were going to start the show, and the show was originally going to be called Insomniac Theater. That was the original name of the show. And even in the early incarnations in the 90s, when I was just doing it in the garage, or my friends, or, making, trying to work this out, it was always Insomniac Theater. And it had the ABC stations already were calling the overnight movie Insomniac Theater.
And David Tell.
They were hosted. I don't think they were hosted. I don't think there was any, I don't think there was any real program, but I think that was a thing. And I was like, well, I don't want, that kind of took the fun out of it, knowing that was something that was already out there in some way. And then David Tell had a show called
Insomniac Theater on Comedy Central. Yeah.
Yeah, Comedy Central. It was just called Insomniac, but I thought in the TV guide, if you got Insomniac and Insomniac Theater, a lot of times they cut off the louder part of the title of a show and other things or whatever. It's like, well, I think it's too similar to Insomniac, and then we've already got Insomniac Theater, so it's like, okay, well, what can I do that's different? And I thought of creature features and how that was kind of alliteration, it's like creature features. It has this kind of sing-song, rhyming to it, So cinema insomnia was my sing-songy, rhyming, rather than creature features of cinema insomnia. That was the thought. And I said it out loud, and I remember Mike going, yeah, that's good. No, that's good. And I'm like, well, I have 10 other names. It could be, no, that's it. That's it. You got it. I'm like, okay, all right. We went on in cinema insomnia, and I drew the logo real big in a picture frame. And, we just started on that picture frame before we had the animated open. And then we would pan over from the picture frame to me sitting in this negative space in the void in my rocking chair. And I would introduce the show as Mr. Lobo. And that was cinema insomnia. And that was 18 years ago.
Wow. When someone, tries to start a horror show on like public access, they give the person like a 30-minute, minimum and stuff. How do you overcome that and do 2 hours?
Well, like I said, my show was on broadcast TV, so my original show was a 2-hour show. When we went to public access in 2002 or 2003, I was only on my local public access for a year or two because the first station I was on, after 24 episodes, they didn't want to do it anymore. Actually, they just put me on hiatus, and I begged off because I wanted to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And when I presented it to the local public access station, I wasn't using any of their facilities. At that point, prosumer camera was good enough to create something of broadcast quality, and since my show was literally just a rocking chair and a black curtain, I could shoot the show anywhere. I didn't even really need a special studio to shoot cinema insomnia. As long as I lit it correctly, it looked virtually the same as it did at KXTV. So anyway, I said, look, I have this show on KXTV. I'm on hiatus. I told them that I want to produce the show myself. And, could we have it here in the new home locally to sort of hold on to those fans? And I had to have a special meeting with the board of directors of the public access station, and they made a special exception to give me a 2-hour slot versus the 1 hour, which was the limitation originally. And it would be the last thing that they aired. So really, their programming day actually ended, and then they just put it on at the very end after their programming day was over. I think that's how they justified it, that it was technically outside of their broadcast day that they put it on. And so it was very kind that they actually said, this is, because I had to make basically an argument that this was something that was good for the community, and somehow they saw my point of view and they let me have a 2-hour slot. Now that lasted for about a year and a half, and they started talking about having to put me on a Tuesday afternoon and having to cut the show down to an hour, and I just said, well, at that point I had already was syndicating the show on other stations, so I just said, I really don't want to recut the show to an hour. I can't really imagine it being being on a Tuesday afternoon. So I just kind of let it stop being on local public access and just focused on syndicating it. But the stations that were airing it, even though any station could air it, and some public access stations did show the 2-hour version. I think the Horror Host Underground distributed a lot of them, a lot of the episodes, the 2-hour version, and it aired on many public access stations, the 2-hour version. So I don't know if they just made a special exception, or the kind of, or those particular public access stations didn't have that limitation, or it was late enough at night to where it didn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
But every time my show has aired on a public access station, it's because someone locally has put it on that public access station. I never sought out to put it on a public access station, and I never advertised that it was on public access because I didn't want to conflict with the stations that were paying to show it.
Yeah.
So I had the main stations that it was on. We had it on a UPN station in Louisiana at 10 o'clock after the Outer Limits on a Saturday night.
Wow.
And then we had it on leased access in Norfolk, Virginia, where the local station, there was a local producer, that bought up 4 hours worth of time on leased access, and then went and got sponsors. So he did all the commercial insertion himself, and then we basically had a barter where we owned part of the commercial time within the show. And then we had another deal two other deals. We had a deal with UATV, where it went out on a satellite network, and small market independent stations could pull it down from the satellite and put it on their stations. And then AMG TV was a syndicator, and they sold it to a bunch of small market, low power stations. But it does still air on some public community stations and public, public access stations. I own my own show, so really anybody who wants my show can have it. So I don't really have a lot of limitations on that. It's just that, they have to get it from me, and then they have to, if it does need to be edited or reconfigured, they have to do that.
Mm-hmm. What was the first movie you showed?
The first movie I showed on of the KXTV version wasn't even a horror movie. It was called They Made Me a Criminal, and it was a crime drama with Claude Rains and the Dead End Kids.
Oh.
And I did a gag where you every time they say the word sucker, you take a shot of espresso. I think they say sucker like 24 times in the movie, because it's like that kind of fast talking 40s jargon. What do you take me for? Some kind of sucker? I'm not a sucker. See, you're the sucker. Like that. The dialogue from that movie went. And in syndication, in 2003, when we went into syndication, our first official episode that went out to other stations across the country was Night of the Living Dead, which I think is almost every horror host's first episode if they're choosing the movies themselves, because that's the best, royalty-free movie that they can probably ever get their hands on. The only problem with that is that everyone does that movie, and the other problem with that is there's nowhere to go but down, because the movies don't get better.
Yeah. Now, I strongly suggest everybody who wants to be a horror host start off with the public domain films, and then when you run out and hopefully you've built up a following, then you can afford, the expensive ones.
Yeah, licensing movies is expensive. I've been in a few situations with channels, when we were with Zombie TV or when we were with UATV, we were with the syndicator. There were some situations, and when we were with KXTV, they had a library, so they had movies they could say, okay, you could do this movie, on top of whatever else you're doing. But I always favored the public domain movies because I wanted to be able to show them free and clear wherever
Absolutely. And how many years overall you've been doing this now?
18 years of being on the air. Probably
Wow.
8 years of scheming. 8 years of just wanting to do it and nothing happening. And
Yeah.
then 18 years of actually being broadcast over the year.
Yeah, I mean, you've been doing it for a while now, and you've really built up a cottage industry. I mean, you get invited to San Diego Comic-Con, and you're pretty much everywhere else. You know, I don't think any horror host has been as big as you since Elvira.
Oh boy, I can't hardly accept that. That's really high praise. I mean, Elvira was. Elvira was smart because the big money is not in posting the movie.
Yeah.
The big money is your character and your image and licensing that character and marketing your character and your image. And she was excellent at that. Between Coors and Pepsi, and between her Halloween costume and her pinball machines and all that stuff. I mean, that's really how you leverage your fame. I have a certain amount of cult fame just because one, I've been doing this a long time. I mean, when we were on UATV, I think we had a footprint of 45 million homes. So there are a lot of people out there who've seen me, and some of them remember and some of them don't. Some of them probably think it was just a bad sandwich they ate one night, a nightmare. But, I've been fortunate enough for someone who's never been in a mainstream movie, never really had any sort of mainstream success. I have been fortunate to have a nice core of people who support what I do, know who I am. I do get invited for conventions, and it's really funny that I always the highs are so high and the lows are so low because you go from someone going, "Oh my God, it's Mr. Lobo! You're the most famous person I've ever met in my life. Could you sign this $5 bill?" And I'm just excited to hold a $5 bill, And then the next minute, it's like, how did you get here? Why do they have you at this show? I don't know who you are. Did you sneak in through the back door? So it's this constant high and low of being put on a pedestal and getting knocked. So I try to keep it in perspective. I certainly don't think I'm the greatest, and I certainly don't think I'm the worst. But at the end of the day, this is the show that I wanted to see at 2 in the morning. This is the kind of thing that I'm drawn to, the kind of movies that I like. I like the people that it brings me to, the adventures that I'm having doing it, and it's really become part of my lifestyle. And I've been through so many, over 18 years of making the TV show, I've been through so many highs and lows, incredible highs and incredible lows. And that's just being an artist, and at the end of the day, there are people who look at your work and get it, and then there are people who look at your work and just say, that's just a bunch of splats on a wall, and you don't have it.
Absolutely. Are you going to do a special Halloween episode this year?
I am. I have a brand new episode. I just put it up on my ROKU channel. I guess I should mention I have a ROKU channel.
Oh, yes, I was going to ask you about that. You have a streaming channel.
Streaming channel, OSI 74. I had a great time working with a streaming channel called Zombie TV, and they sold the business. And I don't know. I hear nothing ever came of it. I guess it's one of the things that get the bigger fish bought them, and they had a good payday, I hope. And but it was over, and we were still having fun. And I remember they were just locking up the studio, and they're like, "Hey, you want to keep your chair?" I'm like, yeah, I want my chair and whatever else that you guys aren't going to use because I still want to keep making my show. But I remember Dixie and I driving home from Zombie TV coming to a close and thinking to myself, well, we had our own streaming channel. What would we do? I mean, if it was just us, we didn't have to answer to anybody. What would we do? And I remember thinking, why does it have to be just horror stuff? I mean, there's so much great weird stuff out there. And there are always those great weird channels to find all the weird stuff. There were the early USA network, and before that, the weird UHF stations. created sort of a retro, I don't know, it sort of has a sort of a retro futuristic vibe, but it's basically supposed to be like a UHF station from another, parallel universe. And, I've got my show on there, and I've collected a lot of shows from my friends and colleagues over the years. Mm-hmm. And we have sort of a collective of strange, unusual. I think everything on the channel is either weird or funny or retro or some combination of weird, funny, and retro. And I think that's almost you could probably define everything on the channel with one of those three terms. But I've got a brand new Halloween special that was shot. We were on the road for 2 months. Mm-hmm. This year, and we shot some episodes on the road. We did 2 live shows, and then one of the other, we did a show at the Sci-Fi Expo in Sacramento. And in the Bay Area, we did a show in the Creature Features mansion. They have a new version of Creature Features now with the host is named Vincent Van Dahl.
I know Vincent, yeah.
And he does the San Francisco, he's doing the San Francisco Bay Area tradition and doing a new version of Creature Features with the permission of the Wilkins family and with John Stanley and all those guys. Mm-hmm. And so they're doing a version, which I've appeared on his show twice.
Yeah.
And they were kind enough to let us film a Cinema Insomnia episode to cross over with their version of Creature Features. So we have an episode that we shot in the Creature Features mansion with a storyline that involves Mr. Lobo really being in the mansion without permission, without knowledge. and Tangela and Livingston trying to get rid of Mr. Lobo pretty much. I'm pretty much wearing out my welcome. But that's the storyline, and we're showing Terror in the Haunted House. So this is an all-new, never-seen before season finale, I guess season 18 finale, that contains Bob Wilkins' original rocking chair. The brand new Creature Features set involves Tangela and Livingston from the new Creature Features and Mr. Lobo all interacting. And so to me, it's kind of unique because it's sort of coming home. It's like, several generations of Creature Features and the children of Creature Features working together.
Yeah, I like what Vince is doing, I mean, it's not quite like, Bob and John did. I've seen the clips of the show and stuff of how they did it, but I like how they're keeping it alive,
It's a hard thing to do because at the end of the day, you have to be yourself. Right. And you have to be true to yourself. Bob was true to himself. Bob was a creative person and an iconoclast, and you can't honor a creative iconoclast like just doing the exact same thing that they did.
Yeah. And plus, back then there was a different time they could do the double features,
Right. And again, what Bob did was for his time, and it was also to Bob's specifications, Bob was the producer of that show, and, he was very much involved in every aspect of it. And so whoever the new host is, I feel like, they just can't be going down a checklist or running somebody else's playbook. I mean, they have to pay attention to who the audience is now and try to make them happy, and also look at where the opportunities are broadcast-wise. It's almost impossible to fill a 2-hour hole in a broadcast schedule with a horror host show these days. Most stations, they're overcommitted, where they've got all these weird, sitcoms that they have to show. They've got their news programming that they have to have. They have all of these sponsored programs that they have to plug in. It's very, very hard to find that 2-hour slot, much less try to find a 4-hour slot.
So with your streaming channel and your DVD line, do you have any convention appearances coming up?
Well, I do have a couple convention appearances. I'm doing Paranoia Con in Pennsylvania, and I'm also doing I've got a Blade Runner event that I'm doing in Bethlehem, and it's November 16th. But I have. Luckily, this is kind of like slowing down a little bit. You know, I'm really I've done an enormous amount of convention appearances this year. You know, with Sinister Creature Con and RetroCon and Intergalactic Expo and Monster Bash and you know and on and on and on and on and on. So this is actually kind of coming somewhat to a little bit of a break for me. Aaron Lane, who is my director, who lives in California, he's flying out here for November. So we're hoping to maybe film some episodes in between Paranoia Con and Future Noir. We're hoping to film some episodes too. But yeah, we'll ramp down the convention appearances probably for a little while. I know that they want me back in California in January, maybe April. I know that I'm going to be doing Creatures Con next year in August.
Right.
So I'll be out in California for Creatures Con.
Yeah, I went to Creatures Con this year.
It's just the traveling is rough, you know, and it's difficult because it's just got to keep that balance of trying to keep making the content, but then you also have to go shop it around and meet the fans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went to Sister Creature Con in June, and I was actually I was looking for you. I couldn't find you, and it's funny. I never go at any con I go to. I usually never get to meet everybody I want to meet because they're so overwhelming, you know.
Yeah, that's too bad. I mean, I was there both days. Yeah, that's a shame. Yeah, I was sort of right next to Cheryl and Finn.
I was at Sherilyn Finn's table. I remember it was like at the end of the day too. I must have been too tired to realize you were there.
Yeah, I was 3 feet to the right of Sherilyn Finn.
Oh, I feel so stupid
Which
now.
was a nice place to be.
Oh yeah.
For a couple of days.
Oh, she's a sweetheart. Yeah, I enjoyed her.
Oh boy, absolutely. Those saddle shoes burned into my tiny brain.
Well, if they book you again next year, I'll definitely come to your table.
I hope that they do. I've been doing shows. I was on Cinemassacre with James Rolfe.
Mm-hmm.
I've been on a few episodes. I think 2 of them have appeared. But I know that the Sinister Creature Con really wants James Rolfe as a guest, so maybe we'll both come out there. I'll be out there as James Rolfe's landlord.
Yeah, let's hope. Let's hope. Well, Mr. Lobo, thank you so much for coming on today, and I hope you have a happy Halloween and that the show goes great.
Thank you. You too. I hope you have a happy horror days, as I like to say. And thank you very much for having me on, having insightful, good questions about my career and being a horror host. And we'll have to do this again sometime.
Absolutely, anytime. And I try my best to ask the best questions and do the best research as possible. So I thank you for that compliment. So you have yourself a great night over there.
All right, you too. Good night.
Okay, good night. Well, there you have it. Mr. Lobo. Ain't he a cool dude? I love people who are passionate about what they do in horror and science fiction. Mr. Lobo is the man, the great horror host. He's the man. And I advise you to all watch him if you get him in your area. If not, check out him on ROKU and his DVDs. If you like this video, everyone, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Add me as a friend on Facebook. Join my Tommy Kovac comedian page on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram and all that fun stuff. Well, that's all the time we have this week on Splat from the Past. Until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying there's no shame in living in the past because the present sucks. Later, dudes.